So yeah, this is what we've got. Hi guys, I'm SKETI, welcome back to another tutorial. This time I'm going to do another REESE bass. I got a lot of requests to do one in Serum this time, so we're going to focus mainly doing a REESE bass in Serum. So let's get to it. Right, so if I just get into this, yeah, I've got a MIDI channel set up. Now I've got two Serums on this because I was experimenting before to make one, so I've made one initially and then we're going to start one from scratch. So this time we're going to do it with saw waves, which is the standard sort of, if we go way back, to the original REESE sound that it was using saw waves basically. And if I just press play on this, why is that not working? I'm having an issue. So that's what we're starting with, simple saw wave. I've put this again in the key of F, starting on F1. So to start with, we're going to bring this saw wave down an octave. So if we play that back now. And then the first thing we're going to do with Serum, and for massive users you'll find this is to sort of start the wave at the same point, is this random dial on both. I'm going to turn this down all the way to 0, because if it's set anywhere above 0 it starts the wave from a random point. So will cause microtonalities. Now it's not that you can't do that, it depends on the sound of the bass that you're going for, but for this I want it to start from the same point every time. I'm going to turn the second waveform on as well and completely mute that, because this is going to FM into this saw wave. And I'm actually going to put this one an octave above as well. Now again, you can experiment with this, you can experiment with different waveforms, it's entirely up to you. But for this sound that I was going for this type of REESE, I found that this was the sound that I was looking for. So I've got a -1 octave and a +1 octave, so these are 2 octaves apart from each other. And if I turn on the FM from B on this dial here, and as I start to turn up and play it back, you'll start to hear the tonalities of this one FMing into this one. I'm going to leave that there for now because I'm going to start to do a lot of modulation. It's all going to be based around one LFO and what I'm going to do to it. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add in a sub, just to make sure that we've got that bottom end in there as well, because the more we start messing around with this you'll find that we lose a lot of the bottom end. And then the next thing I'm going to do, and I tend to do this every time I'm making a bass in Serum, is it's sort of like the glue compressor of Serum, is I turn the master down just below halfway, and go to effects and turn the compressor on, make it multiband, and then push that dial up to halfway. And that basically means I'm going to get the loudest signal out of Serum that I can, and it won't clip either when it goes into the channel. So if we listen back to that now. And I will mess around with the mix of this, the different thresholds as we go through, just to bring up that sub a little bit more again. So back to this tab, the OSC tab, I'm going to turn on Sync No Window, which allows me to, basically it multiplies how many, it's sort of like an octave shifter if you like, but you can do it with micro values rather than it being 1 octave, 2 octave, 3 octave and so on and so forth. And this is going to come into play a little bit later on as well. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the filter on, and I'm going to set this to 24 band and a little bit here. Now the reason why it seems like I'm just going straight to settings is I experimented around with this earlier on, and this is what I was tending to find was working well. Turn the fat all the way up. I could push the drive a little bit, but I don't want to add too much distortion to this, and I cut off around there because again I'm going to be using this LFO to modulate a lot of these different dials that I've already started to affect straight away. Now the next thing I'm going to do is, this is a useful tool because I'm going to start using some unison and bringing that up, but there's an issue with the width I sometimes find. Now this isn't all the time because it depends on what kind of sound I'm trying to create, but with the width set to 100 it's going to make this bass incredibly wide, and when I start to cause modulation to happen it causes weird phasing issues to happen sometimes. So I'm actually going to bring this down all the way to 30. Again, this is just something to experiment with your own sounds, but this it's a useful thing to have, that you can actually change the width from absolutely full wide to, well, if you go all the way down to 0, it'll be mono again. So we're going to bring the unison up to about between 5 and 7. I tend to stay away from even numbers when it comes to this kind of bass, because what I'm looking for, if I just hold that again, is I don't want these two yellow lines, because it basically means I'm going to have the same signal but in the left and the right, and they're slightly panned from each other and slightly out of tune. What I want is just one single yellow line, so it means that the main signal is central, and then all of the out of tune ones are spread across the stereo image. I'm going to bring the detune down a little bit, and also the blend. So we're getting the main strong signal in the middle, and then the rest are just fanned out, but obviously a lot quieter. And if we listen to that now, and you can hear it starts to bring in that nice sweeping slow phase, which when that's applied against this modulation, it'll work quite nicely. Next thing I'm going to do is, this is where you can get that speed difference in modulation, is if we apply the note to the first LFO's rate, this is what happens. And I'm going to actually turn off BPM, so it's on frequencies, because this allows a lot more fine tuning in the speed difference. So I'm going to take that note, I'm going to drag it here. Now if you hold Shift and Option down on a Mac, or Shift and Alt on Windows, I think it is, it changes it one way, because we've got two ways. So it's a center point all the way down and all the way up, or the center point is where it starts to all the way up. And now through experimenting earlier on, because of the speed that I'm working at, which is 170 BPM, I found starting at 0.004, there, and having it go up to 99 instead of a full 100, what's the word? Range. This allowed for it to be mostly in time. Now what I would actually do with this that I've found is I'd actually resample it down and post-process it in a sampler later on, but for this sake I'm just going to keep it as it is, 0.004 and a range of 99. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have it start every time the note triggers instead of off, because it means that I'm going to change this to the sine wave now. It means every time that the note is played, it starts from this point. If it was off, it would start from any random point, like we had this issue with it starting from a random point within the waveform. The next thing I'm going to do is, obviously with it being bass, it's going to be mono, and I'm actually going to have an always legato turned on to about 79 milliseconds, just to have that sort of nice sweep up between each note. If we listen back to that now, just nice, sweeps nicely between the notes. Now this is where we're going to start actually applying this modulation to all of the different tools that I want, and I'm going to start applying it into the effects section as well. But first of all, let's just look at it in this window. I'm going to apply it to the cutoff of the filter, and again this is going to be two ways. So if we listen to this now, and you can hear that speed difference between the different notes, because the note is modulating the speed of the LFO1's rate. Now the next thing I'm going to do is just to add a little pitch change in there as well, is on the fine tune of Oscillator 2, which is being FM'd into Oscillator B into Oscillator A. And we're going to have that as a range of around 10, which I think that means 10 either side. Actually, if we go up, yeah, because it's 100. Yeah, because you can have minus 100 cents and plus 100 cents, so yeah, it's 10 either side. And then if we listen to that again, cool. Next one I'm going to apply it to is the FM, again, making sure that it goes both ways. And then again, all of this is two tiers, so it's all about fine tuning as much as possible. So it's not just sort of like a drag and drop and then leave it. You've got to sort of spend time looking at this and fine tuning it. And again with the sync, I'm going to do a little bit, again both ways. And we're straight away getting into that sort of moving REESE sound that we worked on in the operator one. And I think pretty much for this front page, that is everything that I'm going to modulate. Yeah. So now it's into the effects section. But first of all, actually, this is a cool tool to use if you want to sort of turn all of this off. Is if you go to the matrix section, and in the org source, we can use a macro to actually turn this off, to give it a little bit more. So we've just got a sort of stable REESE to a modulated REESE. And I'm going to apply all of the ones that say LFO1 on this side. I'm going to give them a macro one, and you'll see what happens when I do this. So now they're all macroed. If I turn that all the way up, it'll still have the modulation. But if I turn it all the way down, so now you can sort of decide the depth of how much that modulation is affecting the sound, which is really cool. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a distortion, and I'm actually going to leave it on the first setting. Obviously each type of distortion produces a different sound. And I usually find between tube and soft clip are my favourite distortions. Asymmetrical is quite cool as well, but it depends on the type of waveforms that you're using. I'm going to keep that as tube. Again, apply a bit of modulation to it. I think this way I'm just going to go from the centre point to up. Again, another cool sound that you can add in. Next thing I'm going to do, just to give it a little bit more width, is a bit of hyperdimension. Have it re-triggering, so every time the note is pressed, it re-triggers when the hyper comes in. And I'm going to actually set that really low, and then dimension is sort of like a short reverb. And I'm going to give that quite a hefty mix. So again, it's giving it a little bit more width. The next thing I'm going to add in is, what am I going to add in next? A bit of phaser, yeah. So that's what I'm going to add in. So now this is a pretty cool thing, and this comes from, I think it's 7 Lines came up with this idea of sort of you deciding the rate of a phaser or a chorus. So if you turn the rate all the way down, making sure that it's off BPM, because as soon as it's on BPM, yeah, it causes a bit of movement. But if you have it set to hertz, it's 0.00 hertz, and it allows the depth and the frequency to decide how fast it moves. Now I'm going to apply a modulation onto the frequency here, drag this all the way down a bit, and then if we listen back to it, I'm also going to turn the phase to 0 because it's a bit too stereo at the moment. And again, I just changed that frequency to the sort of note that I'm playing, so it's almost in tune with the actual bass line. And then I'm just going to turn the mix down because obviously it's overriding the sound at the moment. Again, it just adds a little bit of extra dynamic to it, just to give that sound a little bit more nuance and interestingness, if that's a word. Also a chorus, I could again do this same thing that I did with the phaser there, but I'm actually just going to use the chorus just to give it a little bit more width, and I'm going to turn the mix down a bit as well. Now the next thing, just to check with the other one that I did, yeah, it had a filter and a bit of EQ. Right, so first of all I'm just going to apply the EQ, and this is just to boost the bottom end, which I'm also going to do in the compressor as well, because as you can hear, it's lost a lot of the bottom end at the moment. So I'm just going to use a peak like that and bring it all the way down to about 40 odd hertz, which is where the sub would lie. Turn it up a lot and give it quite a wide Q as well, so it's encompassing a lot of those low end frequencies. As you can hear, that's brought in a lot more of the sub bottom end now. And I'm also just going to add a low pass filter right in the top end, just to get rid of, I like to use this word spurious, if you've heard in most of my tutorials now, those spurious top end frequencies that, again, we don't want to clog up the top end with the bass. Obviously we want to leave that for the hi-hats, leads, vocals, so on and so forth in the tune that you're making. And it's always good to A/B, turn it off, turn it on. Anything you add should make the sound better. It shouldn't make the sound worse. So always A/B from it before to after you've processed something. And also I'm just going to apply a little bit of a filter as well, which is going to have some, so this is going to be a notch filter, just to give it a little bit more movement in the sort of mids as well. So 24 notch, bring that down and apply this LFO to it. Like so. Bit of resonance. Yeah, that just tidies up a little bit of the low mids, because obviously with that boost it was getting a little bit too excessive. And then the last thing I'm going to do, I think, in this section is, yeah, just fine tune the threshold bands in the compressor. Cool. And the last little thing is a bit of reverb. Take all of the bottom end out of it, because again, reverb in the bottom end is just bad. It causes phasing issues, makes your bottom end muddy. You don't want a muddy bottom, really, do you? No. Bring the size down, decay about 1.9 seconds. Again, this is all to test. I've experimented with this a lot, so I can sort of jump to these settings straight away. But obviously, if you're trying it out yourself, don't get frustrated. Just enjoy playing around with the tools, and you'll start to find some unique things by happy accidents, basically, as you'll start to play around with it a little bit more. And I think everything else, yeah, is left where it needs to be. So that's just to sit in the background, just to fill up a little bit more of the in-betweenness of the sounds where there's not much going on. And then the last thing I'm going to do is apply this macro one back to all of the things that have LFO1 in the left-hand side. Cool. So it basically means when I turn this macro off, it just goes back to a single tone as it was. But allows you to switch and decide the depth of how much that LFO is actually affecting all of these different things. Cool. And I think that's pretty much it. Again, there's some cool dials that obviously we could macro these out to different dials like this and actually start fine-tuning the sync, for example. Just going to bring that reverb down a little bit because it's a little bit too loud, I think. Fantastic. And then a little bit of post-processing on this one, which I would personally with this, because I've noticed I couldn't exactly get it fine-tuned to how I want it, is when it goes, it's in time in the first octave, but when it goes to the octave above on the F note, it becomes out of time. So I would actually just record a note at F1, resample it down, put it in a sampler and really fine-tune it so I know that each octave is a ratio of the actual BPM that I'm working at, which this tune's 170. So obviously for every tempo that you work at is going to change how much the range of the oscillation against each modulation that you've affected is going to happen. I know that was a lot of big words in that sentence, but yeah, you want obviously this to be in time. The more out of time, it's going to clash against your rhythm and cause issues. So this is where the post-processing comes in strong. Now, I've just used an EQ8 here, it's set to mid-side, and I've turned it onto the side just to get rid of all of the stereo image in the bottom end. So that cleans up the bottom end as well, because you want your bottom end to be in mono. So again, there's no phasing issues, it keeps the bottom end strong. So when that sub hits, it's always strong. And for some reason, we can't hear it now. That's interesting, let me just reset this. So you probably heard that, but I didn't, because Soundflower just likes to poo its pants every now and again. Again, it's a very subtle change. This is just to make the bottom end in mono, and again, just to bring up some of the top end, give it a little bit more stereo boost. And then all I did as well is add a saturator, which I've done on a lot of other tutorials, again with the dry wet really, really low, just to add a little bit more grit. And I think actually what I will do for this is add an EQ8 after it, just to get rid of any, as I like to say, spurious top end. Again, I could go further in, fine-tuning this, bringing some mids up, bottom end up, so on and so forth. And then always at the end, a glue compressor with the soft clip turned on just to stop it from clipping. So yeah, this is what we've got. So yeah, what I would usually do after this, I would take it further, I'd resample one single note down, put it into a sampler, and if you've watched my operator tutorial, that's how we did that. We did a sounding operator, resampled it down, put it into sampler, affected the loop, and so on and so forth, so I could really fine tune it and post-process it as well. Because again, at the moment, we're just working in Serum, and a lot of, even though Serum is my favourite synth now, a lot of complaints is, yeah, you can tell it was made in Serum. So we're trying to get away from that and make the sound a little bit more like it came from an analog synth, where it sounds like you've purchased a really expensive synth and made something really nice sounding. Now, there's nothing against Serum in that regard, it just means you've got to go a little bit further than just having it in the box. So there we go. Anyway guys, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Any questions about what I've done, please drop a comment below. Please like, subscribe, and comment for any future suggestions that you'd like to see, tutorials that you'd like me to do. And if you're really enjoying what I'm doing here as well, just to sort of fund this process of what I'm doing, I've got a PayPal link below if you want to donate any money as well. So anyway, I'll see you next time. Thanks guys, bye. Hi guys, SKETI here. Do you want to learn how to... Or how about... Or maybe even... Well, I'm now giving online one-to-one tuition. The lessons will be entirely centred around what you want to learn. We can cover such things as making drums, bass,
sound design, sidechaining, mixing, composition, music theory, mastering,
and much, much more. Maybe you just want to brush up on your production skills using Ableton Live or Logic, or whatever it is you want to learn. Get in touch on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube to find out more information. Bonus round. Every new student will get a free sample pack of their choice from my Exit Sounds sample label. So if this sounds good to you, and you want your tunes to sound less like, and more like, then get in touch to find out prices and book your first lesson now. See you soon.
Everybody jump up, come on!